Oh no.
He's out of here.
Where did he go? Another
I don't know.
instance?
Disappeared.
Poof. Oh, look at that.
Wow, we could have
Banter
used
just
you when we
turned black
needed
for a
that
second.
stamper, Fire Rat.
Mhm.
Oh,
When what?
Zed was Zed
We
here.
could have used you when that stamper. Where did that stamper go?
Weird that we can't see you, Dead Zed. Um.
See, it changes it.
Oh right. Oh, I see. Right. There you go.
Not a good idea to put this board in here, Aline. I'm gonna be tempted to
Hey,
touch it.
Zeppy.
Hey,
I mean, that's
hello,
What's
hi,
the
Thank
hi.
crack?
you.
Hello,
But do you
hi,
see
hi,
that? Like,
hello,
if
hello,
I
hello,
click on
hello,
this,
hi,
it
hi.
just stays as the circle.
How you doing?
yes, yes.
I'm trying. Oh
I'm
shit, am I in the way?
actually
Sorry.
on
No.
at the moment
I was just talking to you.
building a new
Okay.
version
Oh yeah,
because
sorry.
I actually messed up.
Just stressed out
Oh,
a bit.
okay.
Uh,
That's really
Oh
cool,
yeah?
I
though.
can't
What are you
seem
stressed
This
to
is
about?
awesome. You could
remember
play Pictionary on
how to
this.
do things, so
Yeah,
I
and have
get
you tried the
I
save
spend
button?
hours
It will
doing the
just show
same
up
thing
in
over
your
and over again,
gallery,
and it's
your full
they say
The
painting.
that's the
save
definition
button
of
will?
insanity.
Yes,
Trying something
it's
over and
just
over
like the
again
Oh,
and
no.
selfie
expecting
cam.
different results.
It completely
Yeah.
saves
I
the
don't.
full
I think
image
that's an
in 8K
oxymoron.
to
Actually, I don't think
your
that's true.
gallery.
Yeah.
I think people just say
That's
that. That's the thing
cool.
that people say, but it turns out
I
there's no
like
basis
this.
in reality. I mean, if you're talking about Unity,
Erase.
I feel your pain,
Will it erase my
and what you're
stamps as well?
describing is pretty much standard. I think with
Oh
anybody
my
who
god, this is
True.
uses
awesome.
Unity,
You
you
True.
kind
can
of have to
you
go
can
But
also
through
use
this.
the back of the
I have a
How much?
lower
canvas
tolerance
to
for
erase.
it. I guess maybe
Yeah.
Oh.
that's what it is.
Well, I think yeah.
Oh, this is like that
I don't know
real
how many times
pencil
I've
type
pulled my
thing where they
hair
had
out.
those
I
little. I
know
don't want to
Aline has
erase
been
That's
that
through
because
so much
Nick's gonna
pain.
do that.
I know anybody who's
Erase
spent
this.
any amount of time in Unity,
Oh yeah, this is
it can be
awesome.
a lot of
This would
friction.
be awesome for somebody to use for
yeah.
Pictionary,
Oh, hey
Elaine.
Jen, good
Yeah.
to
That's
see you.
so
Hi.
cool.
Hey,
Yeah. What also is
uh,
new,
just checking this out.
everything that's got painted
Nice,
will
that's
stay
awesome.
there.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you close Banter and come back,
I'm literally at the
it will
last
still be
place
there.
to wait, right?
It will only get away when you
No.
click on clear.
When you clear it, that's really cool. I love that. This is an
But
awesome
this means
idea.
you can just continue painting on it for
Yeah.
weeks and weeks
Oh
if
my
you want.
God, I'm definitely gonna come in here and try.
Mm.
I mean, I've been learning on my iPad from Danny's event, which I love. I've been learning.
Are you still awake, Jem, or are you up early at this point? You're still awake,
No,
obviously.
no, no, no. I'm still awake. It's only 9 p.m. My event's after this
Gotcha,
one.
gotcha. Makes sense. Um, okay, well, look, welcome, folks. Thanks everybody for coming. This is the second one of these events that we've run recently. Avatar makers in place of our usual space makers. Just to give a bit of context, the purpose really here is intended to be, I guess, an open and honest conversation as part of a kickoff of us beginning to build a new avatar system. So last time we had a great chat. The event went over double the time that it was supposed to. We were there for over 2 hours in the end, talking about stuff. And I thought we had some really great ideas and a lot of feedback. So this event is a little bit earlier. Apologies, I was a couple minutes late because I forgot that I had moved this event a bit earlier. But this is just intended to cover off some of our users who couldn't make the last event, right? Because maybe it's time zone prohibitive. But yeah, I mean, basically, what we're interested to know here is what are the most awesome features that I guess you guys can imagine. And for anybody who's here and was at the previous event, I'm interested to know your thoughts since we spoke. And I guess that applies to anybody who wasn't here but maybe saw the live stream as well. But yeah, I mean, one thing I can share with you is that internally there's potentially something happening involving us bringing on a new team member. And this team member may have a AAA background when it comes to a lot of things related to avatars. Now, I'm being quite cryptic there because I'm waiting until everything is confirmed before I really want to talk about it, but I imagine we will be shouting loud about it. But needless to say, with this person's experience on board, chances are we could end up with something really, really cool with our avatar system. I've probably said too much. uh, but yeah, I don't know, would it be useful if I kind of open with some of the things that we spoke about last time, as well as some of the things that we've actually been working on internally, prototype-wise, since last time? Would that be useful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so I guess the first thing that uh, is worth outlining is that what we want to try to avoid is a negative experience, right? And I guess what we're talking about there is avatars are always going to be a pretty big concern when it comes to performance, right? Because it's a direct scale factor, especially on standalone devices. And yeah, what we want to do really is just try to achieve something that can be optimized and isn't going to, involve any kind of risks where it could crash users, right? We want to try and mitigate that kind of stuff as much as possible. So we've put forward this idea that we might continue to use GLB as a base format for what we're doing, right? As opposed to any Unity-based workflows for creating avatars. We've talked about Unity-based workflows, and yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge that we can see there is that it's really difficult. No matter what way we do it, it's really difficult for us to be able to lock things down enough where it's not going to end up out of hand fairly quickly. Now, the thing about it is that I think we recognize the importance of avatars and how much joy they can kind of all bring to our lives. We've kind of watched in the last few days as the raccoons have kind of taken over a little bit, and that's been fun. We want to see that sort of stuff. So I guess the journey that we're on is how can we take some of the most popular avatar features that people are used to, maybe on some other platforms, and how can we look for ways to incorporate those that don't compromise the system and don't involve any kind of risk. So a lot of you are familiar with Ready Player Me, and we've been using Ready Player Me now since basically the very start of Banter. First things first, Ready Player Me isn't going to go away, so everything that works today will continue to work. We're going to maintain backwards compatibility with Ready Player Me indefinitely. What we're going to do is build a new avatar system that we can use instead. I believe, at least to start with, it'll work kind of like VR chat, at least in the early days. Where we're going to create avatar worlds where you can find and equip avatars, or you'll be able to easily share one of your own avatars with somebody else and they can equip it there in front of you. So this is kind of what we're aiming for. Right now, we've got a number of people who've been using Ready Player Me as well as Blender to create avatars and upload them to Ready Player Me Studio. It's a painful process to some degree because it's quite strict. Everything has to be exactly as Ready Player Me says it should be. In some senses as well, it's a very generic process that's designed to kind of handle almost any kind of avatar, any kind of model being uploaded. And I guess the problem sometimes is that with a generic process, sometimes that optimization can suffer. And yeah, I guess what we want to try to do is see, is there a way that we can, first of all, tackle some of the problems people are facing when it comes to their avatars and make it easier, maybe, while we're at it, for those of you who are creating avatars. So there's less work involved. Whatever way you look at it, weight painting is just work, right? You've got to sort of put the hard yards in and you've got to do all that effort. And yeah, so right now, one of the things that we kind of really like about the Ready Player Me system is that it has a number of extras on top that allow us to kind of explore optimization. It has what they call an LOD system, a level of detail system, where you can request more decimated versions of the avatars so that you can reduce the fidelity of avatars when they're a little bit further away. They also have the 2D render, or the render API as they call it, as all of you are, I'm sure, familiar with here in Banter, right? That's what generates that exact identical pose that everybody stands in when they're all looking at you, even if they're facing away. That pose that we all know, it doesn't matter which avatar you're in, it's going to put you in that pose. But yeah, those are useful tools for us to be able to represent the avatars, be able to explore performance options without having to build out all of that pipeline ourselves. But what we found is that there's some problems with those workflows, and I guess this is before we talk about some of the bugs that we've experienced with Ready Player Me, which is the real reason that we're looking into our own system, if I'm honest. But there's still some problems with those workflows. Like, for instance, the level of detail system that Ready Player Me offers, it doesn't reduce the poly counts enough. It seems to be percentage based, and the lowest LOD version is still several thousand polys. I can't remember, Aline. Roughly what? Maybe 5 or 7,000 polys in their most optimized level of detail. Is that right?
Yeah, about 7.5 to 8,000.
So the problem with that is that in order to download your avatar plus a 50% LOD plus a 30% LOD, we're already downloading 2 versions of your avatar, right? So now it's kind of doubling the time it takes to load. And the truth is, it doesn't offer enough of a benefit whenever you get far enough away to make it worthwhile. So one of the other problems we've observed, and maybe some of the people here who are more familiar with Ready Player Me in general are familiar with this too, but sometimes it's hard to kind of get it to a point where it's going to give priority to a certain part of the mesh. Because of how their decimation works, it's percentage based, so it doesn't matter how optimized you start, it's always going to reduce it down by half instead of reducing it down to maybe a fixed number. And that just causes, it can cause a lot of difficulty when you're trying to create something and then you don't know really what it's going to look like on the other end after they butcher it, so to speak, when it comes to the decimation, right? And what you do to, and by the way, I'm speaking from limited experience. There's a lot of people here in the room who are a lot more experienced than me. But and stop me if I'm wrong, if I do make a mistake. But typically, what you might do then is tessellate certain areas, add more detail to the places that you don't want to be as badly affected, right? So we have been working on our own plugin. It's a Blender plugin. And the idea is that it would take a lot of this stuff that Ready Player Me are doing server side, and it would just do it there and then for you in Blender. The reason we think this is a good idea is because decimating or simplifying the models is a really useful feature to have. But we want to give creators more control over it. And we think the best way to do that is by just putting it into an actual plugin so that you can do it client side rather than it be some black box process that happens on a server. So we've been working on a system that just leverages Blender's decimation modifier, and it's able to target specific poly counts. Now, Aline, please stop me if I'm wrong here, because I know there's lots of conversations that we've already had and lots of things that we've been talking about and discoveries and learnings we're making along the way. But for us, anyway, the biggest benefit straight away out of the gate is that we can create really low poly versions of the avatars, whilst they still look generally pretty good. We can go as low as 1,000 or even 500 polys, which is way more useful when it comes to what we're talking about in terms of performance. Like, I'll be honest, we want to get rid of the 2D renders. We want to have a 3D version of your avatar, even at the lowest fidelity, so that people who are a bit further away or in performance demanding scenarios, you can still see their arms, you can still see their hands, you can maybe still see them light up when they talk. Hey, Cigaretto, you got a question?
So would that require us to make our own level of detail models?
That's a great question. So the plugin that we're working with using the Blender decimation modifier is able to automatically create all of the LODs for you.
Okay, cool.
The way, in fact, the prototype we've been working with, it has two let's say it has two base fidelities of your avatar that it considers. One is the local version, which we're actually hoping we can completely open up and give you guys a hell of a lot more headroom when it comes to how detailed your own avatar can be. We've been talking internally about the possibility of your local avatar being able to have, you know, anywhere up to 120,000 polys. For instance, right? Take some of this with a pinch of salt because it may ebb and flow, but you know, understand that we're trying to prioritize your own personal experience because you know, seeing your own hands, arms, and your own avatar in front of you is kind of the first step when it comes to exploring worlds like this. So we think that's quite important. Then we want to look at how can we take that, apply decimation to it in order to generate what we're calling the remote version of your avatar. So like if this is how you see yourself, the other one is how everybody else sees you. And in that case, we're thinking about 30,000 polys. That's what Ready Player Me has right now as the limit for the full body avatar. So we think that kind of makes sense as a base to go with. And then yeah, we plan to have that be able to generate several other LOD meshes that will only appear in the remote version of your avatar that will allow us to then dynamically optimize things on the fly.
Can I quickly reload for everyone?
Yes?
Oh no, mystics.
There we go. That's great.
Okay.
Aline's got a little demonstration on screen for us.
Okay, so just for just for showcasing. So this is my avatar. This is the local one. We ignoring those parts here. And yeah, the problem is we don't actually use this one for remote. We're going with this one. So this is how all of you can see my avatar. And this one, whoops, has about 15,000 since I'm stretching the limit. So I'm pretty much on the maximum with LOD 0. LOD 1 is getting half of it, and LOD 3, which should be the one for far away, is still at 10,000 because they're just doing it procedurally, 50% and 25%, but based off the initial avatar instead of cutting it in half from the previous one. Or even, yeah, what we really want to go one step lower. Let me quickly get rid of this. And if we see how this would look like with about 1,000, I mean, that's pretty rough, but this is really just if you're far, far away. It's more that you see how the avatar will look like. Let me actually turn off the wireframe. So you can still make out which kind of direction the avatar is looking. But yeah, even though it's really messed up, we think this is way better than the 2D cutouts. And that's
Yes,
the
and
main
one day a
problem.
year, we're going to swap and put LOD4 in for LOD0, and everybody gets to walk around as really derpy versions of themselves. Only one day a year. We're going to call it Derp Day.
That's fine. I like that.
Sorry, Aline, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. No, but I hope you see where we going with this. We just think Ready Player Me is really missing out by not providing either custom settings for the LODs or adding a fourth one for the far distance, since the third one, LOD2, is still way too high resolution for everyone to be in the room. So if you see this is 10,000, you're in a room with 30 people. This means even if everyone drops to the lowest LOD, it's still probably more triangles than the whole space has.
Oh.
But if we're down to, yeah, just 1,000, that's just a tenth of it. Or even if we go even lower, that's, I mean, it's getting pretty messy. That's where we have to
PS1.
find the line. But that's also something we actually want to give the creators the control. So there should be, there will be a button you just select your main avatar and then it will create all these LODs. But for everyone that just wants to get into it, there's absolutely an option to create those LODs on their own. So maybe even if you want to hide some Easter eggs in your LODs, so from far away you walk around like something completely different. That would be something you could actually do with the system. We just want to make sure that the triangle count is low enough, and obviously you have to use the same texture to keep the memory size low enough. But yeah, that's what we figured out, and also what I want to show a quick sneak peek.
Oh boy.
So this avatar loaded in and it works fine, except he is kind of crouching. You want to know why he looks like this, even though the avatar is standing? Because this is just one-to-one a model from Mixamo loaded on runtime as a test. So there is no Ready Player Me, there is no re-rigging involved whatsoever. That's just dynamically creation of the IK and the avatar system, which, yeah, we think is pretty cool. So no more stupid A pose, and you have to keep exactly the same bone structure. This should be a lot more loose, and yeah, you can just go wild creating your avatars.
So yeah, this definitely plays into what I was talking about earlier about having to do less work. With this system that hasn't yet been available with Ready Player Me, the way Ready Player Me works is that their SDK ships with a number of avatar assets, and then they just shoehorn those in at runtime, depending on whether it's a, you know, it's a neutral or it's a feminine or it's a masculine avatar. Is what, you know, defines the choice of rig. What we've been prototyping is a way to create and link up those avatar assets at runtime, which means that you don't have to have necessarily a perfect rig as long as it would be considered humanoid by Unity. That's pretty much all that you'll need to worry about. Now, like I say, this is early days. A lot of this stuff is still prototypical and we're still working it out. But as you can see, this is an avatar that fully worked with all the IK, all the hand animations, everything. And we were able to prototype that together in a few days. And that's just, like Aline said, loading up an avatar that's just been downloaded straight from Mixamo. Yeah, go ahead, Cigaretta.
Sorry, I had a question about occlusion calling. So is I don't know if it has to be separate meshes or if it needs it could also be like you know maybe on one mesh and just focus on the faces. But I was curious if in the Unity engine, if it's possible to, let's say the player is, looking at another player, you don't need to render everything behind them, like the geometry that's, maybe they have a ponytail or something, and you can't
Sure.
see it from that. So I was curious, like, how does that work, or if it's possible, as like almost like to um, help with the solution, I guess,
It's a
that
good
kind of
question.
thing.
Honestly, I've never heard of occlusion calling really being used in that way. Talking
Me
about your
neither.
own local version of your head,
Hmm.
that would be removed for you locally. So you're not going to have anything that might be attached to that typically. So stuff that's behind you obviously won't be visible or rendered anyway. But I mean, my gut says that depending on the makeup of the meshes, it could work. Occlusion calling obviously involves baking occlusion maps beforehand, so that can be
Yes.
a tricky thing to try to incorporate into a dynamic system, of course. But something like Unity's culling API, being able to hook into that, telling when objects become visible or invisible in the camera's frustum, being able to
Yeah.
use that to include. In fact, that's something we already do. Every single avatar
figured
that's
as much.
behind you will be a 2D cutout, whether they're close to you or not, regardless of performance. If they're not in your view, everything about it gets turned off. IK animations, absolutely everything.
Oh, cool. That's cool, and it's
so
all
yeah.
local to every individual too.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. It's just based
Okay,
on where
awesome.
you individually are looking. Obviously, won't turn avatars off for other people in those cases, right?
I was just curious about that. I know it's kind of off topic, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's,
No, it's
wouldn't
definitely
leave my brain.
on topic. Because
Yeah.
like I say, it's something we're already using. It's definitely a tool in the toolbox, let's say, when it comes to trying to make this sort of system performant and optimized. And in future, like right now, basically what we have is honestly not a great system, and I can explain why. There is literally LODs at play that control whether people turn into 2D renders or not. And what we do is we quite poorly tie the frame rate to the dynamic distance of the distance scale of the LOD. So if performance frame rate goes down, it pulls the LOD scale in. Therefore, people close to you will turn into 2D avatars. The problem that creates, let's see if anybody can tell me what the problem is that creates. Bonus points, free choice of quest game on the store if you can tell me why that creates a problem.
Snapping in and out, popping in and out of characters when they're around you.
Say that again?
Like, they'll pop in and out when they're close to you, so it's
Yes.
distracting.
Right.
Couldn't
Well,
that, couldn't that look like a frame rate issue too? Like if the frame rate is dependent on, sorry, if it's the other way around actually. If like how the smoothly the cutout moves is, if that's dependent on the frame rate, couldn't that cause an issue in terms of like not performance, but how it looks, I guess? I don't know.
not really. The cutouts should be lerped, and I mean they're way more performant. So the cutouts are obviously, they represent a much more optimized version than, let's say, the full entire avatar.
Oh,
so
yeah.
so those are super optimized. But it's to Fire Rat's point, and you got it. I think Bob is here somewhere.
When the FPS, like, you're in a world with like FPS that constantly jumps up and down, like would it just like keep flicking in and out?
That's it. That's what Fire Rat was saying. It will keep going in and out. Yeah, exactly that. It creates an oscillation that frame rate goes down, you all turn to cutouts. Frame rate goes back up, you all turn back into avatars.
Right.
Frame rate goes back down, you all turn into cutouts. It just repeats back and forth and oscillates, which makes people who are close to you start to cut in and out, basically. So yeah, that's the problem with that. What we plan to do in future is actually a much more complex system. Not only will it have these new LOD meshes at play that we're talking about, but it will also optimize other things. It will, leverage LODs on the IK, possibly reduce the fidelity of things like shaders and stuff on the avatar when they're further away. We can just drop them down to diffuse. But we want to do that with a better strategy. We want to do that selectively, probably one by one, and maybe giving certain groups of people priority within that. Like maybe your friends would be the last ones to be optimized over others. So there's a much better system there that we need to build that can actually work a lot better, and hopefully squeeze quite a bit more performance out of an area that tends to become quite a hog no matter what you do. But yeah, kudos to Fire Rat. Game of your choice. You got it. Nice work. Yeah. So so these are some of the things, I guess, that we've been talking about, some of the things that we've been playing with. I mean, apart from that, we've also been prototyping some server-side workflows that would be able to further optimize avatars, that would be able to reduce and convert textures and apply compression to meshes to further squeeze down the file size of them so that they can load in super fast that first time, right, before they get cached. Something else I want to talk about that's kind of off the topic a little bit, but obviously still related to avatars, is blend shapes. So something we talked about a lot at the last meetup was how we think blend shapes could be a really cool thing to experiment with in general. And we think that at a base level, we want to expand the set of default blend shapes that are supported, right? Right now, we have just flapping your gum and eye movement, eye blinking. But we want to have a full set of iseams to begin with. We also want to have potentially a blend shape that can handle the flapping of wings. We want to have potentially an idle blend shape that might allow you to, I don't know, like, wiggle your ears or, I don't know, have a ponytail or a tail or whatever it is that you want to do. You could have some sort of idle animation that would add a little bit of subtlety to the avatar. Uh, but yeah, we're also thinking about potentially in the future being able to leverage that tech to be able to do things like driving blend shapes using external sensors. If anybody's familiar with VR chat, they use a protocol called OSC to enable people to connect sensors directly into the application. So we're hoping to explore a similar effort to be able to allow people to drive blend shapes from external sensors. We think this could open up a huge amount of capability that people could create more complex facial tracking, tongue tracking, eye tracking, toe tracking. You could have a Fitbit that is feeding your heart rate into a heart that's beating on your chest. That's an example I've been using over and over because I think it makes perfect sense. But the idea is that this would be honestly an open system that people could do a lot of crazy things with. And for us, at least anyway, it seems like blend shapes are a really nice fit when it comes to expressions in general, right? And we've actually been having a lot of conversations internally at the minute about things like expressions, like emoji, like gestures and what they could mean. Like if I wave, does it put up a little wave emoji like it does on Horizon Worlds? Uh, and yeah, we're trying to think about how some of these systems could work, and you can pretty much expect to see some experiments that we'll probably do in some specific worlds to try some of this out. We've already been talking about an emoji system that's based on GIFs. There was even a sample that included physics-based ones that would just hit the ground and float around you, and were billboarded, would always look at you, but were animated GIFs basically, and those seem really cool. And honestly, there's a great opportunity there to open up custom options there, so people can kind of import and use their own GIFs and stuff like that, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I could probably shut up for a bit and see if anybody else wants to put in their 2 cents about any of
With
these
the
things.
new avatar system where you don't have to use like a specific armature, how would you have the physics interact with that? So
So the
like,
physics.
if you have like a bigger like that ogre, would
Yep,
you would you make the physics like completely different for that model, or?
So as it stands right now, that's a very apt assessment. The size and shape and orientation of your avatar can have an impact on the physics in a way that introduces a lot more complication than what we've got right now. So honestly, what you'll find is that the physics character controller in Banter is kind of built out almost completely isolated, right? It's only a local thing. Obviously, all the other people you see in the space aren't being driven by physics. They're being driven by physics in their local client. So that's a separate avatar system, and that kind of controls everything. Obviously, your locomotion, your positioning, all of that kind of stuff. Those positions aren't going to change. So when it comes to combining the IK with a humanoid avatar that has hands and a head, the effectors, the targets for that IK will have the same positions. So it does mean that as it stands right now, at least, you could create a much larger avatar. But I believe that's what we were looking at with this example up above, was that this avatar is bigger than the IK will generally allow. And that may be why we're seeing it in a crouched position as opposed to fully stood up. Is that right, Aline? Do you think that's correct?
Yes, exactly. And that's actually something we are aware, and that's something we have to implement, that it has to align to the physics body. So think about it when you are in an RPG and you're fighting a huge dragon, and then after you beat him, you can make him your pet. And you think, wow, now I have this huge dragon as a pet, and then you get it as a pet and it will shrink down. So that's how it should work. So everyone should still have the same height. So if you're selecting such a big boy, he will shrink down to fit the size. So at the end, everyone will be the same height. Except we built a different system for the physics body to make it more dynamic, and
Yes.
that's something with the new hire that's opened up the option, if we can
Yes.
go this route, that also the size and the aspect ratios of the different limbs are influencing the physics.
Yes.
So yeah,
That's absolutely right. There could
that
be a
would be
lot of
cool.
really interesting surprises in our future when it comes to this.
Exactly, but
For
the
sure.
baseline is that every avatar will be scaled respectively to fit the physics body controller.
Yep. That's right.
I have a thing regarding the blend OSC, right? Just for a
Yes.
first version, it would be nice. Just the simplest thing. Just give me float values that have names that match blend shapes, and they just control them.
Float values that have names that match blend shapes with OSC, you mean
In
specifically?
OSC, yeah. So I sent something through OSC, something like I don't know, wing flap, like a float
Yes.
value, and then I have a
Yes.
blend shape called wing flap, and that's it.
Yep.
That will be
You see,
helpful. So
this is actually
This
quite
is how it
interesting.
should be.
We
Yeah.
plan to have custom blend shape slots, and we plan to kind of leverage these together so that you'd be able to control the naming of your blend shapes and define what's what when it comes to the OSC side of things. At least that's the hope, right? We
Yeah.
still have to explore a lot of this, but you're absolutely right. I think all of the existing ones should also be addressable in a similar fashion, right? But yeah, hopefully it will become a much more open system, right? So you're not locked into here's a default set and these are the only ones you can use. You'll be able to create a set of expressions, I figure, right? And maybe we'll have some kind of an expression menu. This is kind of getting into that emoji conversation a little bit again as to where all of these components kind of come together. But yeah, some kind of an expression menu where you can interact with that. Maybe you can alter the expression on your avatar's face in a quick, convenient sort of quick menu kind of fashion, right? You could stick your tongue out or wink or frown or whatever kind of face expression you want to make. Or, as we know, a blend shape can control something pretty much all over your body. So you can use that to do pretty much anything you want. And then the hope is the same thing then could be hooked up externally. And the only thing I can imagine in the middle that's important there is if we need to do some, some normalizing or rearranging of the data that's coming in. I'm not too sure as to whether that's something that we would handle just yet, or if that's something that OSC kind of has built in to that protocol. But yeah, I mean, in essence, being able to target named blend shapes, ours or your own, is definitely the plan.
Yeah, I see myself having like a MIDI slider controller attached to my hand, just controlling blend shapes.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly that.
And there's another
Uh,
cool program made by a community of furries. It's called VRC face tracking.
right.
Which if maybe you
Yes,
know about it, yeah,
I've
it might
seen
be
it.
nice to
Yes.
just use that program as well. Like it's just sending OSC float values. That's it.
Yeah, I mean
It would be
it's the
nice to
perfect
get the eye
candidate, isn't
tracking
it?
and mouth tracking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's possible for us to hook those things in, we definitely have to. I mean, I think it's worth noting that we're sort of leaning on and looking towards blend shapes in a way that maybe some other platforms might have leaned more towards animations. And I mean, I guess the hope for us is that we can come up with a system where you can really crank it and use these things all the time, and there's the least amount of concern when it comes to performance and stuff like that, right? So but yeah, I mean, creating a bridge, like you say, to existing stuff that makes it possible to do facial expressions or to do anything like that, even just eye tracking, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's definitely a good candidate for as a first kind of uh, mountain to climb, let's say.
I thought
An interesting problem I've had with the shape keys, like the blend shapes, is if you want to try to do rotation on, say, like a round thing, it doesn't really work very well because it tries to move the vertices in a straight line from point A to point B rather than like in a rotation.
Yes, that's a valid point. Very valid point. And we've been talking about this internally as well. And in some cases, we've been thinking about whether bones would be better in some cases.
I
Now,
was
it
reading
depends.
that. Sorry.
But yeah, sorry, it depends. Really, there might be a possibility that there's a similar solution where OSC might be able to control bones as well, right? So that might give you that extra rotational benefit. Yeah, sorry, Cigaretto, you were going to say
No,
something.
I was just gonna say I was reading that shape keys, like using them in excess, uh, is hard on the software on performance, but I don't know how true that is.
Sure.
Which is I don't know. I think that could be why bones are used more commonly, but I don't know. Uh, it's just I was more asking for input right now
Yeah,
because I'd like to know more information on that actually about
yeah.
blend
Well,
shapes.
I can't give you specifics on that yet because we plan to do extensive testing to try and find that out ourselves. But my gut at this stage tells me that lots of animations running is always a known source of performance problems. So being able to optimize away a lot of that animation, which is really the only way to kind of do a lot of this stuff, if we can replace that with some global centralized interpolation system that would be able to handle interpolating several blend shapes on the fly and optimizing those in the process. My gut says that that's going to be a better system, but the truth is we're so early in this process really that nothing is for sure as of yet, and it's really going to be a journey ahead of us to determine what is the best. But the truth is performance is basically top of our list, especially with a topic like this, because it's it's kind of I guess in the truthiest sense on platforms like VR Chat and others where you've got full, you can do whatever you want. There's a bit of a conflict of interest there in that you care about your own avatar, but mostly you don't care about other people's avatars. And they care about their avatars, but mostly they don't care about other people's avatars. And everybody wants to have the highest fidelity, and everybody wants everybody to see that highest fidelity. And that, breeds an environment where things are eventually going to break. So for us, focusing on performance is kind of always been our game here at Banter, and trying to make sure that we can cram absolutely every last little bit of it out of it. So that basically involves testing at scale, creating sufficient enough coverage across what it is that we're talking about, and measuring that, profiling that, doing everything that you need to do in order to gain that understanding. But I'm open to anybody else who's got any experience. My understanding is that blend shapes typically add quite a lot in terms of the file size. So there can be additional costs there for sure. We're hoping to offset that, like I said, with our own server-side workflow to be able to compress the models before they get out onto, let's say, a CDN, that kind of thing. So we're hoping we can offset that file size problem. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody else has enough experience with so many blend shapes or so many animations as to know where that biting point is.
The closest thing I experimented with a while back was like a simple walking animation with blend shapes just to see, and I can't really recall if there were any differences in terms of like just using bones. Um,
Gotcha.
so
I mean, does
I don't
anybody
have
else have any
any. Are
examples
those
of,
Shane
of
shoes?
situations where they have observed problems or differences?
With
Yes, they
Ready
are.
Player Me,
Did you notice them
Okay.
just now?
Oh, I've been trying to figure that out. Alright.
like Ready
Go ahead,
Player Me's
Farhat.
own avatars, if you download them and then go to upload it without any changes other than just exporting it in Blender, it doesn't let you because one
It
of the
fails.
meshes is larger than 2 megabytes. Yeah, the face
Yes.
is with all the shape keys. So you have to remove some of them to actually reduce the size of it by default.
Yes. Yes. That actually didn't used to be the case. They changed some of their limits, and now that I believe now that's the problem. But I guess they apply those. They supply those really, don't they? Those blend shapes as part of the avatar at
Yes.
least, anyway. So
Yeah,
when
they're fully
you add
fixed
extras on
basically.
top, maybe that's not what they would expect
When
as
you
kind of an
remove
average one to be
No,
uploaded.
when you don't make any
when
changes
you
at all,
remove
just use those
Sure.
default shape keys. Yeah.
Right.
the
Yeah, you
default
can't really
ones,
upload any of theirs.
So
no, you
not the
can.
full set,
The
just a
thing
smaller
is,
subset.
no, you can upload the full set. It's just you have to disable in the export settings. It's shape key normals because that's their settings. Like if you look at the I don't know if it's in the documentation, but in the template files, um, the export settings actually disable shape key normal. So if you disable that, you won't have the file size issue anymore.
Isn't
Gotcha.
that gonna
That's really
change the
interesting.
shape key, the way it moves? If you disable the normals?
Yeah. So if you disable that, it just makes it smaller because that's something we don't need, and that's I don't think Ready Player Me uses that anyway.
Right. You think it's just the positions? That's the only things that
Yeah,
are used.
yeah,
Right.
because that's what their own settings have in the template files. So I haven't
Yeah.
had issues with that.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, the truth is, I don't know about some of you guys, but I feel like we could probably stay here for hours and hours on end talking about the many intricacies of the weird behaviors with the Ready Player Me system. We've all got horror stories, and they're all different, which is the weirdest thing. But yeah, I mean, the truth is, we're hoping that a system that we're going to create will be a lot more flexible and will allow you to kind of define what you want. You know, if you want the shape keys, you can add them. If you don't, you don't. And the cost on the file size, you know, it's up to you really. You can go with what we have now, which is just as basic, like I say, the mouth open and the eye blink left and right, or you could go for the full set of iZooms, or you could add all the extras. That's it's really about giving you guys the power and control, I guess, to be able to decide what you want to do in that regard, and trying to make that process easier for you if possible, or at least get some of the more cumbersome parts of it out of the way if that's something that we can do. Um, but yeah, I mean, does anybody have any other thoughts, any other ideas, things that you think would be really cool to include? I mean, one thing we haven't talked about is, and I'm almost afraid to say it, shaders. What do people think of shaders? Everybody's quiet.
It would be nice if we could have PBR shaders. I know a lot
PBR
of people
shaders.
are after transparency cutouts and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just the basic PBR metal rough workflow would be great.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what we were thinking was maybe there's an opportunity for us to include maybe a default set of shaders, and that there's a, you know, there's a way to maybe opt into some of those. So we could go even further than just some PBR stuff. There could be like maybe some tune shaders or maybe some popular Pyomi shaders or something like that, right? That we could include that could be super optimized that you'd be able to somehow choose for your avatar. I mean, I'll be honest. We've even been talking about the possibility of fully custom avatar shaders internally. One idea that we had was that you could include extra shaders in your world. And what we would have is like a fallback system where it would try to use those shaders first, and if those didn't exist, would fall back to one of the built-in shaders then after that, right? Which could allow you to kind of create your own world within a world where you could have almost complete control over shaders. I mean, the problem when it comes to shaders, obviously, is how we apply them and the additional performance cost that they can introduce. They're one of the really highly risky areas when it comes to people being able to create something that can crash other people's clients. And yeah, I mean, I think if we did have, like, say, a default set of shaders that you might be able to pick from, maybe that's enough that we can kind of cover off most bases with the built-in set for avatars. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? Default set or fully custom? Is fully custom shaders really that important? We could have
It's
some
I
cool
love the idea
parallax
of
ones.
having the option to use it in a space would be great. I think people could do some awesome things with that, like how there are custom avatars in the campfire or Ben's toy house.
Yes, yes, it could almost serve, I guess, as a replacement for that sort of a system, but or yeah, or a complementary kind of thing to that sort of a system. I mean, what's interesting about that is it certainly introduces some guardrails, right? I can only use a custom avatar shader in a world that I've created, which gives us all a certain amount of safety and security around that. That at least it's going to be sandboxed, right, inside of an area that the person has to have complete control over in order to be able to do that. It doesn't prevent people from creating crashing avatars and luring people in and crashing their clients, but it means that they have to go one step further to actually get you into a world to make it happen rather than just follow you into any world and be able to crash you anywhere. Um, yeah, I don't know. Aline, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, by default, I would go with just a selection. So you have your default diffuse, you have your PBR, you have your unlit, transparency, and a cartoon shader. And maybe if the community brings up some shaders they really love and they are not too heavy on performance, we can probably add them to this collection to be used everywhere. I like the idea with the world specific shaders, but yeah, it's just the main problem is just that it's limited and yeah, not carries on. But that's probably fine if we see how the alt space campfire space works. But we probably have to see how the impact of the system is. But from me, that's a yes for both systems.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe we need a general safety system that might allow people to just be like, okay, I want to be in this world, but disable custom shaders so it turns it off for everybody, even if the world they're in allows it, that you have an individual override to turn all that off. Now, that's just another tool to help mitigate risk. It's not a perfect one because usually you can only use it after the fact, after you're already crashing, you're desperately trying to get to that safety menu to turn things off. So it's certainly not perfect, but it helps somewhat. And I think we've talked a bit internally about how we can improve on the paradigm of that kind of safety system, in that, you know, using the sort of dimensions that you might typically expect, but even more than that, where, you know, there's a trust system. You trust your friends. You can leave those ones enabled and not others, right? Your friends are able to sidestep your safety bubble and they're able to come close to you or whatever, right? All of these things, of course, being options that you can configure and change and turn them all off or turn them all on, you know, whatever you prefer. So yeah, I mean, I think if shaders were going to be possible, that's certainly an avenue that we could explore that would allow us to have some kind of sanity, let's say. And it means that we have a means to deploy something like that as well, right? Because you can have your shader, have it built into the world, and then in order to apply it to your avatar, we can just reference it by the shader name at runtime. So everything is kind of already there and ready to go. Yeah, and I guess there are some limits around that. I think in terms of what we want for the remote version of your avatar, we're still going to want that to try and, well, we're going to need that to be a single object, a single mesh, a single texture in order to keep those draw calls low. So that will mean that in some instances, you know, you won't be able to maybe have two completely different shader surfaces, let's say. But uh, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we can explore that in future as well, and try to see what the limits are there, how much we can kind of get away with. There's obviously a lot to explore, and truthfully, this new hire that we've been talking about is possibly so exciting that all of this conversation is for nothing, and they're just going to go out and do something fucking crazy that we're all going to love, and it's going to blow our minds, and we'll be sitting on the on the sidelines spectating along with the rest of you guys. But yeah, if something like that does materialize, at least we can maybe do a weekly event out of it and show progress, which if that happens, I can guarantee you that's going to be a popular event. It's going to be a very exciting thing to watch something like that unfold. But yeah, well, look, that brings us up pretty well to the end of this event and into the start of the next one. I will say just before we jump out, if anybody does have any more ideas, any thoughts, this is just an open, ongoing conversation as we move forward. So feel free to dump any ideas, any information you've got, anything you like or dislike about existing systems, other platforms, all of that kind of stuff. Dump it into the ideas section in our Discord so that we can have a means to collate all that together and look at trying to break it out into some semblance of a set of tasks, and then look at how we're going to prioritize that on the roadmap, right? That's basically how that process works. But yeah, so we've got Gems Sing and Chat, which is starting just about now. So if you guys want to jump in there and you can chat, you can